Here's Heiko, this time not from my garage, but from my workplace. You see my vehicle when I'm on shift. Yeah, even though I'm at work and that really doesn't have anything to do with small engine repair, I promised one of my coworkers to fix his Honda Snowblower. It's a HS828, pretty popular model up here in the Tahoe region because they get pretty decent snowfall up here. So you have to have a dependable snowblower. And at the moment I already fixed the majority of the problem, which was a flooding carburetor, and it flooded so badly that it actually filled the crankcase with gasoline. So I first had to make the float bowl and the carburetor work, and then do an oil change, get rid of all the gasoline, do a test run. And then I noticed that the snowblower was kind of leaning to one side, so I figured I'd take a look at the skid shoes and the scraper and the distance of the auger to the floor, to the ground. Here in our aircraft hangar we have nice decent concrete floor. It's pretty flat, so it's very easy to, take the measurements. It's supposed to be 2 to 4 millimeters of the scraper to the ground, and then 4 to 8 millimeters for the auger to the ground. And this one was leaning one direction a little bit. And then I took a look, and apparently one of the bolts holding one of the skid shoes on is broken off, and I'm in the process of replacing this. So I'm going to switch camera around and then show you what I'm doing, just as a little tip if you ever run into this issue on your Honda snowblower. Alright guys, so here at work, unfortunately I don't have any lift, so I have to work all on the ground. Just put a couple pieces of wood under one of the tracks. Here on this side is where, this is the skid shoe. It's mounted right there, and usually it's held on by 2 bolts. And let me show you that on the other side, because that's where it's still in place. There are 2 bolts. Let me turn on some light for you. 2 bolts. Oh, actually, these are the nuts, and those are studs. I don't know if you can see it down there. They're the end of 2 studs. They are held in place by a little rectangular plate, and in the middle is one spot weld, which I just drilled out. It's just sheet metal, so I took both bolts out at the same time. And now let me walk over. Here we actually have a workbench with a pretty decent vise. This is this little plate. This is the head of the studs that's still attached to the plate here. I want to say this was also somewhat spot welded, or it's just a press fit. But so initially I just drilled out the middle, the spot weld. Then I drilled out the studs, and now I'm just going to use some hex bolts, long enough, stick it through, and I'm going to reuse this little plate because it's kind of a stiffener, or it reinforces the sheet metal, So back there, it just reinforces that end of the auger housing here. You can see that when I drilled out the spot weld, I unfortunately created another hole there, but I don't think it's going to be a big deal. So I'm just going to, I could probably put 3 bolts there, but I really don't want to. So I'm just going to put 2 bolts and call it a day. And I'll show you in a second what that looks like. So now I have the new bolts in there. Here, let me zoom in a little bit. So you can see in the middle was the spot weld that I drilled out. Then the leftover heads of those studs, they're still there. They serve pretty much just like as a washer. And those are metric M6 fine thread. I think it's M6 by 0.75 or something like that. And just stuck them through. I already turned the auger. It doesn't touch. It just so happens that this here is kind of a groove. So there's some space between the auger and the bolt heads. And on the other side, is the skid shoe, bolt sticking out, washer, and a nut, and then call it a day. So if that ever happens to you, just drill out this little spot weld in the middle, and then you can push both studs, the broken off and the remaining one, out that way, and then replace them. I drilled out the, like I said, I drilled out the bolts, and still use this little retaining plate pretty much as a washer. Yeah, and then you have to adjust it. So yeah, let me zoom out. So between the bottom of the auger and the floor, you have to have 8 millimeters, and your scraper 4 millimeters, 2 to 4, and here's 4 to 8. You don't want any of those parts touching the ground. There's going to be contact with, you know, little gravel, rocks, unevenness in the pavement anyways, so it's going to be wear anyways, but you don't want them directly to touch the ground. The only piece that is a wear item are those skid shoes. They are pretty heavy duty. I want to say this is 1/4 inch plate. Maybe it's even thicker than that. 5/8 maybe. Did I just say 5/8? That would be more than half an inch. I'm silly. 3/8 maybe. 1/4 inch, 3/8, something like this. And they are relatively inexpensive. So yeah, you want to touch it, adjust everything with those. And yeah, I hope this video will help someone in the future fixing your Honda HS828 or other models. I bet they're all pretty similar. Yeah, we have a 928, and I can barely tell the difference between this one and the 928. All right, you guys take care. Have a good one.